whose work I'm sure you've all seen on covers of Catwoman and Wonder Woman, drawn comics for Star Wars, yes?
Yeah, at one point, yeah.
Yeah, and his iconic work on Ghost, obviously, really brought Art Nouveau back to comics, which I'm just really impressed by.
I wasn't aware that I did that.
Somebody had to.
Sorry, I'm distracted by the embarrassment of the fact that this is done panel discussion wise, not like at a table, because I would have worn pants.
Oh.
If I had known.
Well, it's not like we're filming it or anything.
Oh no. Okay. Just the man in the black.
Yeah, yeah. So I just have a few questions to go through really quickly, and then we'll open it up to everyone else.
Right.
So why don't you just tell us a bit about just your history working in comics, where you got your first break, and maybe a little bit about what you were doing before you started doing Comics Pro.
Well, I started working in comics back in the 20th century, in a time when it was real easy for anybody to get a job in comics. Okay. In the 1980s, if anybody was around in the 1980s.
The best era of comics ever.
The big black and white boom back in the 80s, and pretty much the most famous comic we got from that was the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Mm-hmm. And in the 1980s, anybody with $2,000 and a pencil could publish a comic, and there were more comics than there were artists in the mid 1980s.
Oh yeah.
So it was very easy for like a young penciler like myself to get work.
Is that how you started out, as just as a penciler?
Yeah.
Okay.
And I started out doing like backgrounds for other artists and tightening up layouts and things like that.
And which publisher was that you were
a bunch of different publishers. I did a lot of stuff for Insight Studios, which was Mark Wheatley and Mark Hempel out of Baltimore.
Okay.
And they were doing like Blood of Dracula for Apple Comics and stuff like that. So
yeah, the only work that I'm familiar with from Hempel was the Gregory stuff that he was doing for Piranha. Mm-hmm. So yeah.
Yeah, he made it big while I was a grunt working for just trying to help them get their other assignments out. So books like that.
Okay. And did you have any titles that you were working on? Not that it was just you working on it, obviously, because pretty much every comic is done as a team. Even the black and white ones, a lot of those were done as team books back then. Mm-hmm. But did you have one that was more yours than anything else?
No.
No.
You get in any way you can get in, and I didn't come in with like some sort of dream project like a lot of other people. At the time, Kimiko Comics was really big back then. I don't know if anybody remembers Kimiko, but that's where we got the Elementals.
Fish Police, I believe, was Kimiko?
Yeah, Fish Police. Matt Wagner's Grendel and Mage were both from Kimiko. Also, they had the Robotech license, so they were one of the first American publishers to do a Japanese property in an American comic. Mm-hmm. And they were like in eastern Pennsylvania. I was in western New Jersey, so it was really easy for us kids in western New Jersey to dream about we're gonna get work at Kimiko. That's the way to get in. And those guys like Bill Willingham and guys like Matt Wagner, they started off with their own projects and their own properties. And I never had anything I thought that was worth the paper it would be printed on, so I didn't even bother.
So what brought you into comics in the first place? Did you go to school for it, or was it just something you had wanted to do from earlier on?
I don't know if it was something that I wanted to do. It was something that I knew that I was going to do, not out of any arrogance, but out of my lack of confidence of my ability to do anything else. I knew I
know that feeling.
I would not be testing any planes for the Air Force. I knew I would not be inventing some new form of brain surgery, and I was really terrible at flipping burgers. So I said, well, this drawing thing is the only thing I can do halfway decent. Why don't I do comics?
Were there any titles that really inspired you to pursue that at that point?
At that point? You mean when I got in?
Before you got in.
Before I got in.
Wow.
It was everything from Jack Kirby's Fantastic Four up through the rebirth of the X-Men.
Oh, the Chris Claremont era.
The all new, all different X-Men.
Yeah.
So
cool. So let's talk a little bit about your technique, if you want to. You said you started out as a penciler. obviously now you're doing mostly covers. Is that right? Or are you doing some interior work?
I'm doing some interiors. I
Okay.
mean, yeah, I'm mostly known as a cover artist, especially for like about the past 17 years, because that's all people ask me to do. You know, it's like I'm not going to beat down somebody's door and say, "Give me Spider-Man," because he's cool.
Yeah.
You know, I'm just gonna draw what somebody calls me up and says, "Would you please do Batgirl covers?" It's like, okay, I'll do Batgirl covers.
Okay.
But I did a miniseries last year. I did one of the Before Watchmen books, Dr. Manhattan, and I just got done a story for the Fairest and All the Land graphic novel that's going to be coming out in November, written by Bill Willingham and drawn by like 22 different artists.
Oh, is that part of the Fables?
Part of the Fables universe. I'm the cover artist on the Fables spinoff called Fairest. And on my drawing table at home right now, I've got an 8-page Batman black and white story for Batman Black and White #5 that I'm writing as well as drawing.
Cool. So do you prefer, do you have a preference between doing covers versus interiors, or
I
is
don't.
it kind of even?
I don't. I mean, my biggest preference in life is paying the rent. You know,
Taking what you can get.
Yeah, it's like I'm happy as
Yeah.
long as there's a roof over my head and my family's taken care of.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's great when you can get work that either challenges you or brings you some kind of joy. And I try to find assignments like that, but I don't really have a preference one over the other. I find them, you know, equally enjoyable. I'd been away from interior comics for so long that when I did Dr. Manhattan, I was like, oh, I forgot how much work this is. I instantly gained back all the respect for interior people that I had allowed to sort of like drift away into the ether just by forgetting just how hard it is to draw comics.
Because you had done interiors on Maze Agency? Was that the last one that you did?
Well, Maze Agency was actually the first color project I did. I did Maze Agency. I did Justice League for DC. I did some X-Men stuff in an annual. I did a Star Trek graphic novel for DC Comics. I mean, I'd done lots of interior stuff.
Okay.
But like one of the
Yeah,
last
it's been
things
a
I'd done was like X-Men Wildcats, and that was like
mid-90s?
late 90s,
Late 90s,
right
okay.
near the turn of the century. And when people say what was the last interior stuff you did, and I assume they mean full issues, I gotta go.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness gracious! It was X-Men Wildcats.
It's been a while. Lots changed since then. Do you work more digital now, or do you still prefer real-world media?
I still pencil and ink traditionally, and then I scan in my artwork and I color it in Photoshop.
Oh, so the coloring's all digital.
Coloring's all digital
Oh.
because I am the world's sloppiest colorist. I'm like one of those chefs that ends up with like egg in their ears and just like flour on the ceiling. I'm just like, when it comes to actual real paint, I'm a colossal apocalyptic mess.
Yeah.
And when I discovered digital coloring, I was like, it's so clean.
Isn't it fantastic?
It's just like, I don't care about everybody's like, oh, the undo. Everybody has the undo. I've got my Photoshop set to one history state because I figure if you need to backtrack more than one, you're making bad decisions to begin with.
Yeah. Are you one of those guys who does everything in one layer?
Kind of, yeah. I mean, like the way I'll work is I'll be coloring a cover, and let's say I'm doing Catwoman's face. I'll take Catwoman's face to another layer so that I can mess around with it and do whatever I want with it, and paint and push pixels around. And when I've got it the way I like it, I merge it back down because having 27 layers going at the same time just chews up so much memory.
Right. True. And and like you say, if you keep making those kinds of mistakes, then you got to just change your process.
I find it's kind of like working without much of a net. There's a net, but it's got holes in it. And, you just sit there and go, I got to make decisions, I got to make good ones. And, if you make a bad one, you go, okay, well, I'll fix that. Yeah. And not fix it by just, erasing the last 3 hours worth of work, going, no, let me go in and actually physically repair that. Mm-hmm. And, usually you learn something along the way while you're doing it, as opposed to just dialing back the clock. Yeah.
Do you work, when you're doing cover work, like especially for a character like Wonder Woman or Catwoman, where, it's a really consistent look time after time when you draw that character, are you working from a model or photo reference or anything like that, or is it just repetition and having worked with that character for so long that you've got that face down now?
Well, it's a bit of both. I mean, one of my incredible things that I'm terrible at is consistency. And if I had to draw the same character over and over, like if I worked in animation, I would work in animation for like an afternoon before they fired me, because I cannot draw the same thing twice.
Well, and it's another challenge with interior pages as well.
Well, yeah. And I find that, if I base a character off of a real person, either somebody I know or a famous person. Kevin McGuire is the first person to turn me on to that. When I took over on Justice League, Kevin said, hey, this is who I was thinking of when I was drawing Blue Beetle. Hey, this is who I was thinking of when I was drawing Fire. And I was like, oh, you can do that. Okay, that's pretty cool. I mean, I'd been vaguely aware of it because like Dave Stevens had based Betty Page on Betty Page.
And Alex Ross does it with all of his characters.
Yeah, and that helps. That's what artists call working to model, and it helps you sort of maintain consistency. Like Disney animators will have little maquettes of like Donald Duck or Ariel or whoever that they can refer to time after time to go, okay, the jaw is pointed like this, the hair scallops like that. And, the type of artwork that I'm most interested in at this stage in my career is I'm a big fan of early American illustration. Guys like Howard Pyle, Norman Rockwell, Dean Cornwell, Maxfield Parrish, J.C. Leyendecker. And all those guys worked from life. And, there was a vibrancy and a realism to their lighting, even if they were doing exaggerated stuff like Leyendecker would do, or Rockwell. So that's kind of what I'm shooting for with this phase of my career. So I'm like, hey, if you're going to walk in the footsteps of the masters, wear the same shoes.
Right. Well, it seems like it's paying off really well. Have you gotten a lot of feedback on that from editors, or
they're happy when it eventually comes in. I really just
a deadline.
because I'm like because I go around sort of molesting deadlines for a living. I think when editors just get to work, they're so thrilled to see it because they thought I was going to bail on them, and I've bailed on virtually no one in 20-some years, but I've always got that nervousness in them. So when it finally shows up, they're just so thrilled.
Cool. So where do you see yourself? I mean, how do you see your career evolving in the future? Do you have things that you haven't done yet that you still want to do?
I don't even think about stuff like that. I people, there's certain things in life where people say, oh, hey, you should have more of this and you should have more of that, and you'll be a more rounded person or you'll be a more successful person if you have this. It's like, okay, great. Please point me to the Ambition store. I would like 3 gallons of Ambition because I got none, and. I would love to have like an idea of like, oh, but in 5 years I want to be doing this, and in 10 years I want to be doing that, and I don't. I just want to do what I'm doing now, which is trying to find some sort of enjoyment and solace in the work that I'm doing, and have a fair amount of creative freedom to do whatever sort of like whatever whim takes me that week. This week I want to work with crayons, woo, and just go to town and have fun with that. And I do have a fair amount of creative freedom at the moment, and I do not take it for granted. But, what I'm going to be doing next week, still trying to figure out what I'm doing today.
Oh, so you don't have like a list of projects that are on your calendar, that things that are coming up that you're aware of, or is it?
Oh yeah, I mean, I've got, but those are assignments. Those are concrete.
Yeah.
If you're talking about out in the ether, the ambition of like, what do you want to be when you grow up, young man? I don't know.
What did you want to be?
Overfed and over lubricated, I don't know.
So I notice you have a really active online presence as well. I know a lot of artists it's been a challenge for people putting their work up online and still maintaining a level of control over that. Do you have any problems doing that? Or
I don't know if like telling fart jokes on Twitter constitutes having a strong presence in social media.
I was more thinking actually your DeviantArt account.
My DeviantArt account, which I haven't touched in a year and a half, because I would use DeviantArt, which I love. I love DeviantArt to death because it's a community of artists, for artists, about artists. And you get the occasional wag who would come on and sit there and say something crummy, and I take that stuff to heart so well. I'm just crushed by an awful comment on DeviantArt. But most of the time, there'd be people with like questions about technique, people wanting to talk shop.
Yeah.
I love doing that. I love being able to show the different aspects of working on a cover. Like, hey, here's the pencils. Hey, here's the final colors. That sort of stuff.
So you post a lot of process stuff up there too?
A lot, but not too much. I've got a problem with a publisher over in Europe who takes my stuff off the internet and collects it and publishes unauthorized editions of my stuff. And it's one thing to stop somebody in your own country, but international copyright law, I don't make the kind of Franklins that allow me to like go into Spain and tell people to stop doing stuff. So I have to be careful about what I put on the internet and at a high resolution, because people are just, sort of taking it and doing stuff with it.
Yeah.
But because if I was going to do a tutorial, I'd love to do a tutorial like another DVD. I did a DVD about how to do like a mermaid drawing with Copic markers, and people seemed to like it because it focused. It wasn't like okay, I will take you from the opening of your first eyes to art. It's like
Right.
that would be like 90 volumes. It's like, just here's how I like to use Copic markers, which is a tool that I've really taken to, and people seem to like doing stuff with Copic markers.
You can get some good effects with them.
I really like them. I just love the fact that they're refillable. That I don't have like a bucket of like marker husks.
Dead markers.
It's just like it's like they're like shells from a machine gun after a while, where you fill them up with like Prismacolor 2s, and it's just
Do the Copic markers, the color, does it blend as well as the Prismacolors?
I find that virtually any marker blends as well as any other marker, depending on the paper that you're using.
Oh, okay.
And it's like the type of paper that, say, a Prismacolor 2 has a certain type of effect on, or a design marker has an effect on. You can get the same blending qualities out of a Copic or a different brand of marker if you find the paper that goes well with the marker. It's all about finding the right combination of tools in your media.
Okay. How often do you find yourself wanting to experiment with new media?
I never want to experiment. I am
Never.
I am like incredibly obsessed with comfort, especially because I'm becoming a geezer. And it's just like, if I just comfortable shoes, and how much does this belt hurt?
Yeah.
And could I fall asleep on the sofa? That is my judge of how good a sofa is, And
So familiarity is a good
familiarity, and whenever I do something that's like, people are like, he's challenging himself, or he's doing something different because he's blazing a new trail. I'm like, what are you talking about? It's like the power went out.
Yeah.
I had to go use markers because the Photoshop wasn't working.
Oh, yeah.
I am the accidental success.
Yeah.
So like I never sit around and go, today I shall attempt to work in sand or something. Never do that. I'm still trying to master the stuff that I'm already working in.
Right.
But every once in a while, something will come along where you have to work in a different medium, or have to work under a different set of circumstances. And I'm really good at getting the basics of anything. I'm a complete moron when it comes to mastering stuff, but like, hey, here's a guitar controller.
Right.
Okay, in 3 minutes I've got it.
Yeah.
I can't play great, but I know how to use it. Okay, hey, here's a hockey puck and a stick. This is what you do. It's like, okay, in 5 minutes I can at least get the puck into the net.
Yeah.
I'm really good at picking stuff up, and then
Taking it as far as you need to take it.
probably.
Yeah.
And then like a child watching Sesame Street, I just la la la, just kind of wander off into something else.
So
and
I
just-
gather by that you're primarily self-taught. As far
yeah,
as art
I'm
goes.
primarily self-taught because I'm not smart enough to get a scholarship, and I'm like, I think, too white and middle class to have gotten any sort of government aid.
Yeah.
So I was like, I was literally like the Jan Brady of like college people. It was like, nope, there's no way you're getting in. I was like, okay. But like, fortunately, I mean, how many universities or schools have a curriculum that teaches comic book illustration?
Yeah. Not enough.
Not enough.
Not enough.
And I mean, I think everything in life you can go out and learn how to do. I mean, I see a couple people here in the audience that are cosplayers. I mean, there's really nobody out there that teaches you how to source fabrics or find, a particular hat or something you're looking for. You go out and learn these skills. You talk to other cosplayers, or you do research. I mean, you don't want to work with say a self-taught surgeon. I think school's important
There's
when it
something.
comes to stuff like that. Perhaps a lawyer. I might like a lawyer who's got a law degree, but when it comes to art, there's so many things out there you can learn for yourself. I mean, I miss having the collegiate experience. I miss that, but I don't miss the fact that I don't have crushing debt.
Right.
Because, when I got out of high school, when I was ejected from high school, because I certainly did not learn enough to get that diploma, they just literally were just like, go away. Just here's a piece of paper with your name on it, and just get out of our hair. I worked in grocery stores. I worked in a transformer factory, electrical, not
the toys.
not more than meets the eye. And just regular jobs until I got into comics. And when I started working in comics, when I first got into comics, I was just showing Mark Wheatley at Insight Studios my work to get a critique.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
If anybody here is an artist, I mean, you've taken your art to professionals at shows, and if you bring your art to me, I can give you some advice. I've told a lot of people that if you're really good, the advice I'm going to give you is very diffuse and zen.
Yeah.
It's like, well, be the pencil. It's like garbage like that. I love giving portfolio reviews to awful artists.
Really?
I love it because the advice you can give them is in such broad strokes.
And you're at table 630?
Yeah. Not anymore. The people who have a lot to learn.
Yeah.
For me, it's easier, especially not having gone to any art schools or been. I don't know how teachers teach. I don't know what's good or bad. All I know is how I taught myself. But like when somebody has like broad like strokes that they need to work on in their stuff, it's easy to give advice there. Right. It's easy to go. People have
these are the building blocks.
2 eyes.
Yeah.
People have people have one head. But when somebody comes in
and
a
hand looks like.
This is what a hand looks like, But like when somebody brings their artwork up and they're almost there, but it's just something about their feathering or something like that that's off. That's really diffuse. It's really hard to give somebody advice in that realm. But I never went to a school, so I don't know how you're supposed to do it.
Right.
I don't know how gentle you're supposed to be, or how much of like an iron taskmaster. Hitting them with a bamboo cane and then again. I don't know if you do that. But I don't know what the question was, but I'll just say yes. I am just off on a tangent.
So just a little bit back to the DeviantArt community.
Right, we were talking about DeviantArt.
Well, right. we wandered off of that, but yeah. Do you find have you run into any challenges in being part of that in posting your artwork online? I mean, you mentioned that there was a publisher who's been swiping it and publishing it out from under you. But
there's all sorts of oily characters and ne'er-do-wells who will ruin the experience, and you try to balance that out with for every one of them, there's 100 people that are either they're getting some inspiration from what you're doing, which is one of my favorite things in life. When somebody comes up to me and says, "Hey, I love your artwork. It really made me want to be an artist," I go, take that vocational guidance counselor, I win. It's like I actually amounted to something. Somebody actually had a positive experience, or something positive happened in their life because of some boobs that I drew on a comic book cover. So it is a nice experience, and you can be a little too much of a cave dweller. You can be a little too much of the J.D. Salinger who just never comes out, never talks to the audience.
Yeah, and I know a lot of younger sort of up and coming people who are just sort of developing names for themselves, developing their styles and their career path, using the online community to promote their work and look for other avenues for that sort of thing. But for a fairly well established at the time that the internet exploded, have you found any benefit from being online? Has it helped you promote your work any, or helped you reach a different audience than you think you would have reached otherwise?
I think yes to all of that. I think that with the ease of which we can all use the internet, somebody might discover your work, especially now that comics are going digital. It's much easier for somebody to discover your work than it was in the old days, where you had to go into a comic shop or go to a store or something along those lines.
Right.
I think it's the reason why I do shows is so I can interact with people, and you can have a virtual interaction with somebody via the internet.
Yeah.
And there have been times where people have asked me about their work, and I had to stop because if it takes me 20 minutes to look at somebody's work and then type them out a critique, it's like, okay, well, I started to get to the point where I had 20 to 25 of those a day.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, okay, I did the math. I'm going, that would leave me like no time to actually do the work. And I had to put the kibosh on that. So I think it's for the most part it's good. It's like any other form of human interaction. It's got its ups and its downs.
Yeah.
It's just that so much in the digital world is, like when I first started coloring with Photoshop, with computers and stuff, people were all like, oh, well, you can use this one filter to make it look like an oil painting, and you can use this other filter to make it look like, like a mosaic, and this one makes it look like it's a sculpture made out of rotini glued together with Elmer's glue.
I like that. That's my favorite filter.
The F27 key, it's the best one.
The glitter filter.
I would say to people, well, I don't want it to look like an oil painting. If I wanted it to look like an oil painting, I would do an oil painting, I don't want a digital shortcut to that. Mm-hmm. And I think that I was one of the people in the first wave of artists who maybe were like, well, why don't we just explore this like it's its own beast,
Right.
Like I think when the airbrush was created, the actual real airbrush, people would use it as a shortcut to mastering various, like sort of say watercolor or painting techniques. Like,
right.
One of the hardest things to do in watercolor is to do a blend,
the smooth gradients.
The smooth gradients. Mm-hmm. And like with a Photoshop, you can go pull up that van. Look at that, Conan, And, people weren't learning the skills that require you to be able to pull that off in, say, painting or
right.
watercolor, something like that. And one of the most important things that comes with mastery of any discipline is that you don't just have those skills, but you also have the decision-making process of a master. Mm-hmm. And somebody who's gone through the years to try to figure out how to do that, whether it's like, paint something a certain way or play a guitar a certain way or like break someone's head with a martial art, whatever it is. If you give those types of power to children, they're going to abuse those powers. They're just going to break heads and paint Conans all the time. And I make the worst examples. This is why I shouldn't teach. But like the people, like if you spend 20 years learning how to do something, you gain a different perspective. And by the time you get to the point where you have those skills, you are a different person than when you started on that sort of disciplinary path. Okay. And you are making informed decisions. You're making decisions that are based on 20 years of experience. Mm-hmm. For example, I just say 20 years like arbitrarily. And when somebody first got that first airbrush, they're like, "Woo, I can make gradations," and they're
right.
making terrible choices. Everything's got a halo and a glow around.
They're trying to duplicate the painterly techniques,
but
with an airbrush.
But they don't know why those painterly techniques are being applied in those ways by those masters. And it's the same thing with the advent of computer coloring in comics. People are like, "Oh, I can make this look like anything," and you're going, "But you never learned why."
Right.
You should do that. And I always thought, well, the computer shouldn't be a digital simulation of painting skills or something like that. It should be.
So you prefer the more obviously digital techniques?
No, I don't like obviously digital colors. I like it when colors look crunchy, like they're made by hand. I love the way Dave Stewart colors Hellboy now, where it's like it's still pretty much the flat colors, but you can sort of see these little brush strokes in there that make it feel like it was done by hand. What I'm saying is, I don't think the computer should be used to fake a different medium that you could just go out and do anyway. You know, it's like I like the idea that the computer is its own medium, its own tool. Okay. Let's explore that thing as its own beast, as opposed to it being a simulation of another beast.
Okay. It puts me in mind of the comic Shatter. Do you remember that one? It was all drawn in super paint, I believe.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
The old black and white. But again, that was colored with traditional coloring techniques.
Yeah.
It was drawn in the computer and then colored by hand.
Which is
an odd
what a backward way
mix.
to do things.
Yeah.
My goodness gracious.
So you mentioned as comics go toward digital a little earlier on. Is that something that you have done a lot of thinking on in terms of your work and how it's going to fit in with that? Or is that a question that's really not in your hands at all?
I don't know if you remember that thing we talked about 15, 20 minutes ago. I do no thinking. I'm literally just a walking litmus test.
Yeah.
I just like, does that look pretty? Yes, wonderful, more, I accidentally come up with things that work, and people are like, "Oh, on this cover you used, hunger colors because, I'm like, hunger color. What are hunger? Like, there are certain, oh, well, certain colors affect people emotionally different ways, and I'm like, huh." I did not know that, and I was like, am I accidentally making people angry with like this pinup? I used anger colors, and now people are just cranky, and I'm like,
everyone's just getting sleepy.
Yeah, and it's like, how much control do I have using these colors? And I didn't really know about that kind of stuff. Everything I've done that's successful, 98% of the time it was an accident. I was just going for something. Does this work? Is this aesthetically pleasing? And yet somehow it accidentally makes a good base for a soup. Whatever it is, you're going, what? And I was like, okay, I didn't mean that, but fine. So I don't really do a lot of, I find that I really undo myself if I do a lot of thinking up front.
Sure.
And it's taken me like 20-some years to go, just trust the mistakes. All the best pieces I've ever done where I have painted myself into irrevocable artistic corners where I'm like, oh, what in the name of God have I just done? And then when I paint myself out of those corners, the solutions that I came up with to get me out of that corner are kind of neat.
Yeah.
And I never would have planned those beginning. I had to make that awful artistic mistake getting there and then, do an artistic sort of like rhinoplasty to get out of it. And then it ended up being something like, oh, well, you must have planned that from day one. Not really, no.
Do you have any? You mentioned earlier that that when you started, you didn't have any dream projects or anything like that you had always wanted to do, or projects that you developed for yourself to work on. But has that changed in the ensuing years, or is that something that you're still just working on the assignments that you're getting?
Well, I am just working on the assignments that I'm getting, but I know that there's no future in that, son. And that's the part that vexes me, is because I'm going, well, I should be coming up with my own character, publish my own book, do things like that. But nothing I ever come up with makes me like want to do it for more than a day.
Oh yeah.
And like I'll sit there and I'll go, woo! I came up with the best idea for something. This is gonna be awesome. I wake up the next morning going, that was a bag of crap. Wow, that was just so awful. And then I look at like the other day, Hellboy turned 20, and I'm just like Mike Mignola still loves doing Hellboy after 20 years, and I'm going, I want that.
Yeah.
When they talk about the ineffable things that you should go out and get, young man, you need this. That the ability to come up with something that you are so emotionally in love with that you still want to do it 20 years later. I'd love to have that.
Is the challenge there? Do you consider yourself more of an illustrator than a storyteller, or do you find that your work tends to go both ways?
I would consider myself more of an illustrator than a storyteller, but it's one of those sort of vague, differences, because a good illustrator tells a story.
Sure.
Norman Rockwell would tell an amazing story with a single cover,
right?
And but I do so little comics. I've done more comics in the past year than I've done in the last 17 years.
Okay.
I feel wrong saying I'm a comic book artist.
Okay.
Because I feel like, wow, that's really sort of insulting to the guys who are, just in the trenches and.
Sure, you're.
So. I don't remember what the question is, but I'll go.
That's okay.
I'll say 11.
11. Good answer. So I think that about covers it for me. Was there anything else that you wanted to talk about while you've got your podium here? Any advice to the kids?
Lay off the crack. I don't know what to tell people. People always ask,
where do you get your ideas?
And it's like, just don't even. People come up to me. I want to be you when I grow up. And I go, oh kid, aim higher. Just please, have some sort of respect for yourself. No, I'm terrible at these things. Whenever I get to a con, and somebody comes up and says, "Hi, I'll be helping you at the show, and here's your list of panels." And I look down, and just in bold red letters, "Spotlight panel." I'm like, "Oh, just please put me on a Twilight panel. Get me on the Game of Thrones panel. Anything." Oh, let me tell you this. I was at San Diego Comic-Con a few months ago, and I was one of the special guests.
Okay.
Not because
That's
of
a
any
good deal.
No, not because of anything like meritorious I had done in the arts. It was, I think, because Sergio Aragonés had a cold, or like Mark Evanier was busy that weekend or something, and they were just like, "Well, we've got an extra badge. Give it to Adam," and I had to do a spotlight panel. Okay. Now, if you look around, this is about the number of people at a decent-sized show that will come hear me, sort of like blow wind for 60 minutes about my life. Yeah. I walk into this room, which was 3 times the size of this, and every seat was filled.
Wow.
And I was like, whoa, this is amazing. I was like Sally Field at the Oscars. Oh, you're all here for me. Oh.
Well, you're not an unpopular guy.
Yeah, but I'm not. I just I know my place in the universe. And like I walked in there and I was like, this is a big crowd. And the dumbest thing I did was I believed it was for me.
Oh.
And I had this panel, and I had a friend of mine named Mark Walters who does the Big Fanboy podcast. I had him because he's an old buddy of mine. I had him in the position that you're in. You know, we work well together like a bunch of old vaudevillians. You know, we know each other's jokes and how to set them up and how to pay them off. And we had this crowd in stitches. I mean, we were just like making off-color jokes, and it was the best hour I've ever had with a microphone. It was unbelievable. People cheered and applauded. A week later, we get a message on my Facebook page. My wife passed this on to me. There was a woman who said, I just wanted to tell you how much we enjoyed your panel. We weren't there for you, me and my family. And when she said family, I was like, oh, good. She had a bunch of children, with me and my friend Mark telling, like penis jokes and stuff. And I was like, damn it, why are kids so small? You can't see them when they're sitting in the audience, And this woman says, yeah, we were actually there waiting for George R.R. Martin, who was on after you. And I was basically just telling jokes and being a complete dope to like 6,000 Game of Thrones fans. And there was probably 50 of them were there for me, and everybody else was just keeping the seats warm. And I was just kind of like, awesome, And but she said you were much more fun than George R. R. Martin. He was dry, and I was like, oh, woo, victory.
Yeah, he's a pretty have you read his books? He's a pretty humorless guy.
But that's why, like, when we have these spotlight panels, I'm like, don't make me do one. Don't make me sit up here with no pants and a microphone and just tell the same jokes I've told a million times. So yes, 11. I don't know.
So does anybody have any questions for Adam while we're here?
Help us out. We've.
Well.
What's that?
Okay, so we maybe have time for one or two quick questions.
So this is only a 45-minute.
Yeah, I was just told that. I didn't know all day long.
Okay.
That we need to have everybody out at 10
Okay,
Sweet.
so they have some setup time.
That is literally. That is the.
Does he feel better now?
That is the spotlight panel equivalent of a snow day. That's
Yeah.
like waking up in the morning and going, but school bus is like, yes, no one's going anywhere.
So we'll get a couple quick questions and we'll start down here. What was your?
Okay.
Did everybody hear that?
The gentleman asked, on a typical workday, how many hours do I put in drawing? I do not know. When I mentioned earlier about how, when I figured out what sort of, beast, I am as far as it comes to work. I mean, the worst thing you can do is fight yourself. The worst thing you can do is try to be something you're not. And it's kind of like, I treat my artwork like it's a child that I had. And it's like having a child, and you want that child to be a lawyer. And when that kid wants to grow up and be like a hardcore gangster rapper.
Or circus.
Yeah. And you're going, you know what, the worst thing you can do is fight what that kid wants to be, because you're just going to end up in an advanced state of stress, and that's not going to be a happy kid, and you're not going to be a happy parent. When I realized I had to stop fighting my own natural tendencies, whether it's artistic decisions or the way I work. And one of the things I discovered early on was that discipline and I are oil and water. And I do not get up at the same time every day. I envy those cats that can get up and they just start drawing at 9 o'clock. They've got their cup of coffee and they are ready to go. I can't do that.
Do you find that you have days you're just not in the mood to draw at all?
Oh,
and you just
every other day.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest trick of being a professional, is getting the work done even when you don't want to do it.
Yeah.
But like, I've tried to, like, okay, in bed by, up by, drawing by, break by. And it's like, it's literally the worst artwork I've ever produced. It's like, I go to bed when I'm tired, I wake up when I'm done sleeping, I get the artwork done when it needs to get done.
Yeah.
And that usually ends up with the best thing. And that works for me, but that wouldn't work for everybody.
Right.
And
so you don't have a set schedule that you try to follow even slightly?
Not even slightly. And I learned that like 10, 15 years ago, that one of the reasons I was like losing my hair and just chewing my fingernails off was I was trying to fight that.
Yeah.
But that's just when, learning more about yourself and going, okay, well, what's the best way to handle me?
Right.
And,
keep your art happy.
Well, it's just, don't fight. don't fight things that don't need to be fought.
Right.
And the best editors I've ever worked with in comics are the ones who understand that every freelancer they work with has a different set of requirements. Some of them you got to keep on a short leash. Some of them you got to just let them go and say, hey, have a blast, just be back before the street lights are on. And the editors who realize that you use a different hand with each of the talent that you deal with, and that's kind of how you have to be with yourself.
Okay, do we have time for one more quick question back there? Okay, yeah, one more quick question. Yeah, go ahead.
When you get a cover assignment, do you get like a gist of what they want, how it's connected to the story, or do they just say, you're Adam Hughes, we know, do what you want?
Yeah, like how much freedom do you get with the cover assignments?
Okay. Everybody heard that, right? I have to repeat that? Okay, cool. It depends. It changes from job to job. I hate getting full scripts because, one, I don't like to read. And
That's not why we're here.
it's not why I'm here. I'm here to pictures, cave wall, mastodon. I'm not sit there and read somebody else's description of a mastodon. No, I don't like to read the script because I will inevitably get to a point in the script where I'm going, this is the moment. This is the point where this has to be the cover, and it's always like the moment in the issue. The perfect, and it's 9 times out of 10, it's page 22, where at the end, meow, 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 Batman is actually Aquaman, or whatever. And, I'll sit there and go, I can't do that. I can't put that on the front of the book, because that's what the writer and the artist are banking on, you going through 22 pages and some Skittles ads and some Nike commercials. And you get to the end, you're like, Batman, Aquaman, my mind is blown. If I put that on the cover, I've just ruined their job, and they're going to come punch me. And so I like it when I get a sort of a patois. I like it just a sense of what the issue is about. And they'll come up to me and they'll say, okay, in this issue, Cinderella is in Africa. And I'll go, that's it. That's all I need. Cinderella, Africa, we're done. I'm done. Yeah, I got all the news I need.
Check.
And then just a few things for me to get my imagination going. Also, that way I don't end up being like on the Ferris covers that I do right now, the editor will send me copies of the pencils. And I was like, no, I don't want to know what the artist did on the inside. Because I don't want it to be terrible, because that means I've got to follow a terrible design. And I don't want it to be better than me, because I'm going to go, well, then have them do the cover. Look how pretty they draw. That's so much nicer than what I can do for you. Just leave me alone. And so I just like to know a little bit. And
do you ever have editors come back to you and say, well, that really doesn't fit with what's happening in the book? So
yeah. I mean, it usually takes a much stronger editor. That's the great thing about getting older, is now everybody I work for was busy being born when I had my first job. Like I'm working for children.
So you scare them, basically.
Well, yeah. That's the weird thing is as you become more geezerly in your years, the younger the editors get, and they're afraid to I don't want to upset you, but could you please change this? And it happens not as much. But I like it when an editor tells me, you don't want to sit there and have them just sort of blow smoke up your butt and go, oh, and everything you do is great. It's like, no, give me some feedback. Let me know what I need to change.
Cool. Well, I think that's all the time we have here today with Adam, but you're going to be signing again at booth 630?
6:30. I'll be back then at 6:30 signing comics and doing little charity head sketches, which is great because people donate. They get a little head sketch, and we've raised just this year close to $20,000 for animal rescue.
Nice.
And it's just we've saved. I mean,
Yeah.
That's you guys. I can do that headshot all day long. Doesn't matter if you're paying for it. It's the people who are donating money. They walk by. They drop $5 in the bucket just as they're walking by, and we've saved a bunch of dogs' lives. It's great. You guys are awesome.
Cool. And if any of you are here tomorrow morning at 11, Adam will also be on a panel upstairs in room 6, I believe.
Not a spotlight, I hope.
No. It's a round table.
Woo, sweet.
Talking about being an artist.
Excellent.
So hey, all right. Thanks a lot.
Thanks for coming by, guys.